The ultimate bait for distance casting off the beach. Hi, my name's Roger Osborne. In this video, I'm going to share with you what I believe is the best bait for casting long distance off the beach and also for catching a lot of fish. There are a few baits that fall into this category. So which is best? As usual, I'm going to show you all the gear I'm using, the rods, reels, hooks, sinkers, how I set up, and everything else along the way. Stick around to the end for a free PDF download which will outline some vital keys from today's session. If you're enjoying these videos, I love it when you like and subscribe. It really helps my channel. It's absolutely free. I really appreciate it. Let's get into the fishing. Now today it's actually blowing an onshore breeze, which is perfect for what I'm teaching on today, because that's one of the things that hinders you to cast distance. If you're throwing your line into the wind and you have a bulky bait, it makes a massive difference to how far you can cast and whether you can actually reach the areas that you want to reach to catch fish. So it's perfect for my lesson. I'm really pleased about that because yeah, it's awesome, helps with teaching. Just quickly, the boot camps I've been holding, the fishing weekends have just been going off. People have been having an amazing time of instruction, catching fish and great mateship. I decided to hold one this year on the mid-north coast, which is closer to people in Brisbane, either Brisbane or Sydney. It's in an amazing area, a fishing paradise where I've spent hours and hours fishing there. It's really close to my heart. So if this is something that interests you, head on over to my website, click on Fishing Weekend, and make sure if you want to come, book it in quickly because they do sell out fast, and I look forward to seeing you there. Today, what I'm faced with is, it's about an hour after low tide, so obviously everything's pretty shallow, but this particular beach has no obvious gutters or holes. It's pretty much a flat deck and it's really shallow. So in this instance, I need to get my bait out beyond where the waves are breaking, just behind the breaking waves, and it's a little bit of a distance from shore. So I actually need to be able to cast a fair way so that I'm not landing in super shallow water with nothing in it. I've just got to get out where the water's deep enough, where the fish patrol. They like to patrol along right at the back of where the waves break. So I'm going to need to put in a solid cast in order to be able to achieve that today. And so that's why certain baits there's a vast difference between the different baits that you can use for distance casting. Now in this video I'm going to talk about what I believe is the ultimate bait for casting a long way off the beach and catching lots of fish. And there's some really good reasons behind making that claim. But first of all, I'm going to talk about the humble half pilchard. Lots of people use pilchards for bait, and I love pilchards. I've caught so many thousands of fish on pilchards. They have a wonderful scent. That's one of the great things about pilchards, is they get a really bloody oily scent that comes off them. And so they almost, fish have a very strong sense of smell. So they work very well. But you know what, if you want to cast a long way, a whole pilchard is very bulky, and certainly you try and cast one into the wind, it's not easy. But if you use a half pilchard, and in particular the tail half, and then you trim, not the whole tail off, but some of the tail, probably 2/3 of the tail, you're really going to make a compact bait that fish absolutely love, and that will fly through the air really well. You'd be surprised how well you can cast a half pilchard with a decent sized sinker. Now I'm just going to rig up. I'm keen to get my line in the water. I just put this set line out, but I think I'm hooked up. That's really strange. I feel like I'm stuck to the bottom. But I'm on the beach. There shouldn't be any rocks out there. Yeah, it's moving towards me now. Must be weed. I've only got 15-pound line on, so I can't just reef it like crazy. Now that's a big chunk of weed. No wonder it felt so heavy. It's not what any of us wants to catch. So I've got my set line here. I brought down 2 lines with me because it's always great to be able to stick a line out and let that do your fishing for you and helps you catch your feed a little bit quicker. Now, is it always necessary to be able to cast a long way when you're beach fishing? That's a good question. In reality, no, it's not always necessary because there are often beautiful pockets of water that are close to shore, but in my experience, I think that probably 75% of the time you do need to be able to cast a pretty good distance. One of the things that we have to face on the beach a lot is wind, and wind really makes it difficult to cast. So having baits that are of a low profile is really important if you want to be able to get to a specific spot or a deep part of a beach when you've got wind in your face. Even if you don't have wind, there's very often times you need to be able to cast further. I was actually fishing with some people last night, and they were not, obviously they were just learners, they're not very experienced, so I was giving them a few tips from casting, but they were not actually achieving a lot of distance initially. So I was casting their line out for them, and I spent a lot of time casting, so I was getting out into a good area. So when I was doing the casting, they were catching fish. But when they were doing the casting, because they're just learning and they're learning to cast distance, they weren't catching fish. So that really made a big difference, and I see that a lot. So that's why I want to talk about it a little bit in this video. Now, I've mentioned half pilchards as a good bait. Another one of my favourite baits is actually squid candles. And you know, on each squid you only get 2 candles. They're kind of like these long, they actually shoot them out when they're hunting and they want to grab a fish. They shoot these things out, they've got suckers on the end, and they grab their prey. Well, those candles are like a long, thin piece of beautiful, soft squid, and you can thread them onto a hook just like a worm, and they're a really thin profile. Fish love them, and they're easy to cast a long distance. However, they're not that common. You've either got to be able to catch your own squid, which, you know, once you learn how to do it, you can be reasonably successful, or you've got to buy whole squid that still have the candles on. So they're not that plentiful. So that actually leads me into what I believe is the ultimate bait for casting distance off the beach into wind or not into wind. I just want to have a little look at my rod. I'm getting a bite actually. That definitely was a bite. My line's gone slack. What's going on here? Oh no, that's really strange. I could see my rod going like that, which means it's obviously not, but I've got a weed fish again. My top bait is mostly gone. My bottom bait is still good. So I'm going to just put a bit more bait up the top. Oh, look at that, Mr. Whiting. So guys, that really is the best introduction to what I believe is the ultimate bait for distance casting off the beach. That is the humble beach worm. And you know I use beach worms a lot and I teach people how to catch them, but I'm honestly continually amazed when I'm fishing, and I just realise what a blessing they are, because worms are so thin, there's virtually no wind resistance when you're casting them, and you can cast them straight into a breeze, and that bait and that sinker still just flies out there. So they are undoubtedly, I believe, the best low profile bait for casting off the beach and getting quality distance. Also, the sheer fact that you catch so many different species on that one particular bait, they really are a standout bait. Now this afternoon I've got fairly challenging conditions down here, which is kind of, like I said, it's kind of lending itself to the lesson, because I'm not sure if you can see, but that's a fair distance out there that the waves are breaking. I've got to walk out a little bit, but even though I'm casting into the wind, I can actually get my bait beyond where the waves are breaking. And that's where I just cast the line to catch that whiting. I tossed it straight out behind the back of the waves. Now when I wound it in, I had a whiting on, but my top bait, that's all that's left of my top bait. So there must be a few whiting out there because both of my baits got hammered. One of them's got hardly any bait on it, and the other one, the fish had eaten it all. So I just continually realise how wonderful beachworms are. So I'm just going to whack one on. You always feed the hook into the worm's mouth. That is if you're using the head end of the worm. And then I pull it up over the end of the hook using my thumb and forefinger, so that really my whole hook is hidden and buried in the worm. There's no barb exposed, but it doesn't matter because fish just swallow the worms. I'll quickly just chuck this back out exactly where I showed you. You can see here comes a set of waves. It's pretty chunky, but there must be a few whiting out there. I'm going to wade out a little bit. Fortunately, it's pretty shallow just here, but that's breaking a long way out. I had to walk out a fair way. I got a little bit wet, but you know, there's no way I could have cast and landed where I was with hardly any other bait. Because when you've got such a thin bait on, it just sails through the air almost like you don't have a sinker. And believe me, that makes a huge difference to how many fish you can potentially catch, because you can just reach areas that are a long way from shore. Oh. What the heck? I was picking that rod up because it looked like I was getting a bite, and then of course this one's been whacked. I think I know what the culprit is. I'll just have to pull that other one in a minute. I'm heading down the beach. He actually pulled a bit of line. Wow. Still going. This guy is heading south. Here we go. Oh, I tell you what, he's a real torpedo. Here he comes. I'll get him with this wave. That is a torpedo of a salmon, I tell you what. That's a huge fish. I can hardly hold him. Now that of course is on a beach worm. That's the only bait that I have with me today. I'm actually going to keep this salmon. Oops, because he's going to have a lot of nice, beautiful eating flesh on him. So I'm just going to take him up and quietly put him to sleep, and then I'll be back. Well, I think I might have some fish on this line as well, actually. So I better attend to this one. A lot of slack line out there. I can't feel the end yet. And it's been washed in quite a long way. Getting towards the end now. So what is going on? Do I have a fish or do I have no fish? Doesn't feel like much. My baits have been attacked somewhat. Definitely had some bites on my top bait. It's been chopped in half. My bottom bait has got some bait missing as well. So I'm just going to top these ones up and get it back out there. There was a couple of questions on my video that I did recently on catching small mullet and flathead. And there was a question from a guy named, well, he's not his name, but it's called PJJT. G'day, mate. And he was asking about where he can potentially catch flathead, what's the areas that I fish. I live south of Sydney on the south coast near Ulladulla, so I fish in the lakes that are nearby to me and off the beach. However, I used to live on the northern beaches in Sydney, and I'll tell you a great place that you can fish for flathead is Pittwater. Pittwater is a really big area, and it's also a great place to catch poddy mullet as well. So I can highly recommend Pittwater. I grew up on Narrabeen Lake, and even though it's such a small waterway, it still produces amazing fish. It's quite incredible. It's in the middle of suburbia, but it's an amazing fishing spot. So PJJT, I reckon if you live in Sydney, you should give Pittwater a go, because you can definitely, it's got beautiful sand flats, you can pump nippers, you can catch mullet, great place to fish. I also had a question from Keith Prynn. G'day Keith, how are you, mate? About flathead and the fact that as the tide goes out, the water rushing off the shallow sandy areas over the drop-offs into the deep water, you know, that's definitely a big thing, Keith. Probably more relevant in rivers where the tidal flow drops faster. In the lake, or in many lakes like where I live, in the main body of the lake, there's not a lot of tidal flow and there's almost no current at all. It's like that in a lot of lakes. So it's not so much that it's not an issue with the water dropping off and needing to be on those edges. Really, what I'm talking about is fishing around the edges of a lake and making sure that you're getting your bait out where the drop-offs are in that particular place. It's a little different to a sandbar on a river where the tide comes up quickly and goes down quickly. It's a lot quieter in the main body of a lake. Okay, I've got a little bit of a break in the waves, so I can walk out a little bit, makes it a little bit easier. Get my bait out the back. Beautiful. I expect to catch something on that. The line that I just tossed right out the back has got a fish, which is awesome. I think it's probably another salmon actually. Amazing. Actually, it's not just a salmon, it's a brim salmon. Brim and a salmon swimming in unison. Well, there you have it, a brim and a salmon, both with worms in their mouth. That's pretty cool. You know, this salmon, I thought something was a bit strange. This salmon has someone else's line in it. This line is not mine. It's really a very thick line. I'm using light line. So someone else has hooked this salmon and has lost it. Anyway, I'm gonna kill him very humanely and quickly so that we can enjoy eating him later. But yeah, wow, so he's been swimming around with someone else's line. Now I just landed that salmon and the brim together on one of my light beach fishing outfits with only 15-pound monofilament line. And the salmon actually had someone else's line and hook inside it. I actually found two hooks, which I've got here. The smaller one actually was in the salmon's mouth, but it wasn't attached to anything. And then this bigger hook was attached to this length of line, which I'm looking at that and I'd guess that that's probably, if it's not 50-pound fluoro or mono, it's at least 40-pound either fluoro or monofilament. But someone has had this fish on a decent strength line and has lost it. The fish has got off and it's swum around, obviously still been hungry and took my bait. But you know, I'm going to be doing a video really soon on the absolute #1 way that people lose fish. I see it all the time, and it's actually a really important thing. So make sure that you stay tuned for that, because that's coming up really soon. The amazing thing about beach worms is that I can cast them a short distance if I want to, or I can cast them a mile. I basically cover all bases when I'm using them for bait, and the amazing thing is that they actually exist in the many millions. Right up and down. I mean, our coastline is littered with beaches. Certainly on the east coast and down into Victoria, you get beach worms down as far as South Australia. As to Western Australia, I've got a few Rogers Fishing members who live in Perth. So far, no one's been able to locate any beach worms over there. I hope to get over there one day and just go exploring, looking for them. But because they're so abundant, once you learn how to catch them, you really have an amazing, wonderful bait. And they're much more plentiful than things like squid candles, which are a little bit more, or you're certainly harder to buy and probably more expensive in the end. For catching the flathead in the lake, I had a couple of other questions. I had one from Luke Doherty. Hi Luke, who was asking whether using the live mullet is a seasonal thing or you can do it all round. Yeah, it is a seasonal thing. It's pretty much about half the year, from about September, October through to about April. You can't really find live mullet or the little baby mullet in winter. They just disappear. So there's probably about 5 months of the year where you can't get live mullet. So at that time of the year for flathead, you need to be using soft plastics and soft vibes. And that's another whole method of catching flathead. I also had a question from Jenny Harris. Hi Jenny. Jenny wanted to know, I had 3 rods when I was fishing off the shore for flathead, whether they were two of them were a double up of the same outfit or whether they were different. Actually, I had 3 different rods. One of them was my light beach fishing rod, which I have in the description underneath my videos, because I often use that if I want to cast a long distance from the shore in the lake. And the other rods, one of them was actually my squid rod. It's just a 9-foot light rod. And then the other one was a standard estuary rod that was 7 feet long, rated to about 2 to 4 kilos. So I actually had 3 different rods. I improvise a lot and I just use what I've got. The main thing is that you've got the rod and the reel matched up with the right line. If any of you guys have any of your own secrets when it comes to fishing off the beach and casting into an onshore wind, or how you're able to achieve distance off the beach, do you use other different types of baits that are a low profile? I'd love to know if you've got any great ideas. Please let me know in the comments. Also, if you have any questions, please put them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them either in the comments or in a video. If you'd like a free PDF download of some vital keys from today's session, hit the link in the corner or in the description below. Thanks everyone for watching and joining me in another beach fishing session. How awesome is it? I absolutely love beach fishing. I look forward to seeing you really soon in the next video.